well.
Sure.
So that
You just answered for me, I think, right? So I mean, does that make sense that you like?
Well, but it means that I think I'm feeling like I want a more subtle account of the distinction between form and content, and that those moments when you can't keep them apart should be doing work for you, or at least doing work.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's probably the next. It's got to be the next step for me if procedural rhetoric is going to be a key term in the project. I don't know that it is. It's a key term for BOGOS. It's a key term in software studies, which is then why I sort of decided. Really, my intervention here is that BOGOS has repeatedly said, not only in print but on his blog, in interviews with Stephen Colbert and others, that that politicians do not really make meaningful use of procedural arguments. What he means when he says that is the video games that they make are banal and lame and don't make interesting political arguments. And what I'm saying is, what my intervention is, we've got to look broader than the kinds of procedurality that you want to look at, which is essentially video games and artistic products. So let's look at the sort of where the rubber meets the road in terms of volunteer interactions via a website. What are the procedures that have to work there, right? Now, the form-content distinction is the biggest problem, but unfortunately, the reason I don't have a good answer for it is if we can't pull those two apart, then the term procedural rhetoric becomes difficult to use. Do you see what I'm saying? And that is not, I think it's so I guess what I'm saying is it's a question for BOGOS, more so than for me, in the sense that really what this talk is doing is applying that term, and it's a small part of what I'm doing, which is more about, let's look at more kinds of software, more kinds of interactions than just the artistic, than just the expressive aesthetic.
Okay. I'll have one rejoinder to that, and then I'll shut up.
Okay.
Which is that it seems to me that there's also a history of certain kinds of there's a history about thinking about form and content in themes like this. Think about McLuhan as someone who seems to loom large here. And then the obnoxious version is how is this different from 1960s French ideology?
Right. Sure, absolutely.
Actually, this relates to several comments. One is to support the analysis of form. At least at the beginning. A implies B and B implies C, then A implies C, that's without respecting content. If you're arguing transitive, okay? But the other is a step way beyond, which struck me based on a lot of comments here, which is when you use a procedural script, an if-then, you may be talking to somebody who has their own if-then. So that example of the shoes was great. When they hit you with shoes, you say hat. And when they hit you with a hat, you say umbrella. And when they hit you with an umbrella, you say a car. And they're very confused. But the first one on the banking struck me through experience. Because I have a script which is, if I get a computer, I want to get the computer to turn off and I want to talk to a person.
Me too.
Okay, now I learned that one of the things you can do when you get the computer is to keep saying words like operator or assistant. And you may get switched.
Just say agent over and over again. Agent.
But I discovered something else accidentally, but I haven't had the time to experiment with a lot of different phone calls, which is if they now either say yes or no, and what you say is Bogota. And they say, I didn't understand. I repeat the question. And if you do this
it'll kick you to a person.
It'll say, I'm sorry, I don't understand you. Here's an agent.
Okay, so what I like about this is that what I want people to take out of that is, and I think what BOGOS does too, is you do this on a day-to-day basis. You interact with procedures, and you can take those experiences and then rethink how you interact with software. So if you think about when you open up, something as simple as Microsoft Word, that is invisible. Nobody thinks about Microsoft Word anymore. Nobody thinks about its procedures until it breaks down, of course, which is an old argument, right? But anyway, the idea here is that understanding that process of how we game procedures and say things like agent we can take that experience that we all can easily understand and do every day, and then think about how we interact with the software more critically, so that we can actually be software literate, and not just throw up our hands when something goes awry and say, I got to call in the experts, and not just sort of bemoan it as a problem, but actually engage with the problem. And hopefully, this will lead to the next step, which is maybe more of us do need to learn how to write code on a very simple level, right? Because when we leave it to the sort of high priests of coding, we're not in control of our tools. We, I don't know, humanists or people who don't code. So I just want people to sort of think, at least think more critically, at least think and understand that they can, that it's not scary, that it's possible. And then if they can get through that step, then maybe write some code too. That would be nice. But I'm not an expert programmer, so, and I don't think I need to be.
But I think that the examples that we've been talking about are really pretty basic examples. One of the things I've read about video games is that a huge percentage of people who follow the video games, especially the role-playing games, I think this was one of the most started examples from a lot of people. It was so hard that 90% of the people who buy the game don't finish the game. And then I was thinking about Wayne State systems. Because I just spent 2 hours this morning trying to figure out how to answer, two straightforward questions. And there's math, there's cards, and things like that. And they're so complicated. They're so big that it's hard to figure out how you could interact successfully with these giant systems. So how are you going to take what you did today and make it useful for me next time I'm in stuff?
I mean, what I would hope that you would be able to do is understand, just a basic understanding that software is procedural, I think, for many people in the humanities is news. It's news in the sense that you haven't, when someone says it to you, you say, oh, that makes sense. So it's a list of procedures. But understanding that software at bottom is a list of procedures is an important thing to understand. And then when you interact, the idea is that software is a series of enthalpies. And you are filling in the missing premise, right? What is the software assuming about you? Understanding what the software assumes about you being the audience, right, can allow you to then maybe understand the breakdown a little bit better. Or when you call up the help desk, say, I think that the software thinks that I am a woman who enjoys women's shoes. Or, that's a sort of, like you said, is a basic example. But the idea being that if you interact with software as a series of procedures and not as a screen that sort of covers over all the sort of inner workings, then you can think more carefully about why it's not doing what you expected it to do, or why it works really well. Why does this work? Why do certain tools work really well and others don't? Well, it's making maybe the correct kind of assumptions about you to use.
I think the software assumes that I know how to work the software.
That's bad software, right? That's bad software. Scott, were you going to say something?
I actually do want to ask you this series. How is this different from 1970, like Louis Althusser, Fontaine, the whole? Because, the description of it's ubiquitous and it's invisible sounds like it's a definition of ideology, right?
There's a lot of stuff.
And you read form as maybe you have an answer, but or maybe you don't, and maybe it's not. But I just think of my history of 1970s film theory as reading everything as form and not content. Trying to, that the film is a machine which articulates the subject position, which you then have to occupy.